A local officer drew his weapon on a man simply getting breakfast, scoffed at his Secret Service credentials, and within moments found himself surrounded, disarmed, and humiliated before a crowd capturing every second on their phones. It unfolded on a Thursday morning, not early enough for the world to feel dormant, but just late enough that traffic near Burlington had begun to swell with people clutching coffee cups and rushing to meetings they dreaded attending. Chris and Marcus pulled into the Marathon station on North Prospect Avenue just east of downtown. Black SUV, subtle government plates. He looked like someone transplanted from Washington, D.C., not wedged between Pump 4 and the red box kiosk near the ice machine. A commanding figure in his 40s with perceptive eyes, and the kind of posture that made others instinctively step aside without being asked. He wore a sleek charcoal suit, pristine white shirt, no tie. Just the earpiece in his right ear and the small glint of metal at his waist. The credentials that only became visible if you truly looked. He wasn't there for snacks or killing time. He just needed caffeine. 1 cup, black. That's all. As he stepped from the convenience store, coffee in hand, that's when the officer arrived. Marcus Everett, county deputy. Broad chest, military cut, mirrored aviators despite the overcast sky. He parked aggressively, cutting the wheel sharply, barely within the lines. Saw Chris, saw the SUV, saw the suit. That was all he needed. You with that vehicle? He demanded, exiting his cruiser rapidly, one hand already hovering over his sidearm. Chris glanced over calmly. Yes, sir. Keys, Everett barked, advancing closer. You got registration? What's your name? Chris raised an eyebrow. Sir, I'm on official duty. I can show you my. I asked for your name. Everett snapped, voice escalating, eyes darting behind the sunglasses, his hand now fully gripping the holster. Several people glanced over from the pumps. A man beside the car wash paused, phone raised. Chris kept his tone measured. My name is Deputy Chief Chris Spencer, United States Secret Service. That only seemed to inflame Everett further. He took 2 aggressive steps forward, uncomfortably close now, posture threatening. Don't play games with me, he snarled. Everybody's got a story. You look real confident in that fancy suit, huh? That your cousin's car? Brothers, you steal it from somebody. Chris blinked. I can reach for my credentials. Slowly. They're in my jacket. Everett snorted. You think I haven't seen fake badges before? He stepped back, drew his weapon. A woman near Pump 3 gasped audibly. Hands where I can see them, he shouted. Chris didn't flinch. He set the coffee down carefully, knelt slowly, then interlaced his fingers behind his head. His voice remained steady. I am not a threat. My badge is in my left inside pocket. Everett didn't care. He laughed, weapon still aimed. Man thinks he's in some movie. Chris glanced at the growing crowd stopping to watch. Someone across the parking lot raised a phone. The officer circled slowly, trying to position himself behind Chris. Bet you got backup in that SUV, huh? You recording this with your boys? Chris said nothing. Silence was safer. But then came the pivotal moment that altered everything. The moment Everett leaned down and yanked open the SUV's door. He didn't discover drugs, no weapons, just a laptop docked into the console and a government-issued ID clipped to the glove compartment. He hesitated. Then Chris spoke, loud enough for everyone to hear. You just opened a secured federal vehicle without probable cause. Everett's eyes narrowed. Yeah, and you just impersonated a federal officer. That's when another car pulled into the station. Another black SUV. Tinted windows. Silent engine. Everett didn't notice it yet. His focus remained locked on Chris, weapon still drawn. But someone inside that second SUV definitely witnessed everything. And they weren't amused. Officer Marcus Everett's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger. He stalked around Chris like a man rehearsing dominance, jaw clenched, words flowing faster. The badge meant nothing to him. The composed demeanor, the confident posture, none of it registered. "You got clever responses, huh?" Everett muttered. "Let's see how long that lasts." Chris remained kneeling on the asphalt, hands behind his head. He didn't argue. He didn't attempt to explain again. He simply waited. Two teenagers from the neighborhood had stopped near the snack machine, eyes wide, recording everything. A middle-aged man leaned against his pickup at pump 7, arms crossed, observing. And now the second SUV had rolled to a complete stop near the air pump. Everett turned his head at the sound of a car door closing. A woman emerged, tall, olive complexion, dressed entirely in black, earpiece in place, no hesitation in her stride. "Spencer. Status?" she asked. Chris didn't move. Hostile local officer. Drawn weapon. Unauthorized search of a secured vehicle. "I've shown no resistance." The woman's eyes locked onto Everett. "You want to explain what the hell you're doing?" Everett turned, lowering his gun just slightly. "Who are you?" She produced her credentials from her chest pocket. "Senior Agent Natalie Wilson, United States Secret Service." "That man is my superior." Everett blinked. The tension fractured momentarily, but pride held him back. He claimed to be Secret Service. "I wasn't about to accept that at face value." "You pulled a weapon on a federal officer," she said sharply. "That's not skepticism. That's a felony." For a moment, it appeared he might argue further, but his voice emerged quieter. "He didn't look." "Don't finish that sentence," she interrupted. "You've already said too much." A third SUV turned into the lot. This one faster, more aggressive. Two men exited. Suits, no sunglasses, weapons holstered, but hands alert. One of them, a sharp-featured man with silver at his temples, walked directly to Chris and lowered his voice. "Deputy Chief Spencer. Are you injured?" "No, sir. We're recording. Body cams active. Witnesses documenting." Local law enforcement failed to verify credentials before drawing. "Confirm?" "Confirmed," Chris replied, still kneeling. Natalie glanced at him. "You can stand, sir." Chris rose slowly, dust on his pants. Still composed. He adjusted the edge of his jacket as if he were entering a boardroom, not standing in a gas station parking lot where a gun had just been pointed at his face. And still Officer Everett refused to fully back down. He turned to the agents, chest puffed out. "You people don't come rolling through here expecting special treatment. I did what I believed was necessary." "You believed wrong," the agent with silver temples said. "And you're now the subject of a federal misconduct investigation." A man in the crowd shouted. "I got it all on video." Another yelled. "He had his weapon trained on that guy the entire time." Everett looked around. The walls were closing in, and his tone shifted. "I didn't mean anything by it. I had reason to believe." "No, you had prejudice," Natalie said, stepping forward. "And now you've created a serious situation." Chris finally looked at him directly. His voice was calm, as if discussing the weather. "I was getting coffee. You decided I didn't belong. That's all this is." Everett remained silent, his face flushed under the weight of eyes watching him. The phones, the agents, the people he'd assumed wouldn't matter. A young woman near the entrance of the store whispered to the person beside her. "He really just pulled a gun on that guy and laughed at his badge." But it wasn't a whisper anymore. The story was spreading in real time. Posts were going up. Black federal agent harassed by local cop in Burlington. The videos were already being shared before Everett could even holster his weapon. But things were about to escalate beyond just being filmed. The law was now involved. And it wasn't on Everett's side. It took less than 3 minutes from the third SUV's arrival to transform that gas station into something far more intense. Nobody shouted. Nobody applied handcuffs. But every second after Chris stood up felt like the air grew heavier. Not louder, just more conscious. The man with silver temples stepped forward again, opening his badge for the officer to finally examine properly. "Supervisory Special Agent James Mercer," he said, low and clear. "I need you to surrender your weapon and step away from Deputy Chief Spencer." Everett blinked twice. "You're serious?" "We're not asking," Mercer replied. "This stop was unauthorized. The weapon draw was unjustified. And you've already tampered with a federal vehicle. You're now under administrative detention pending complete review." For a moment, Everett stood motionless, too motionless. Then his hand twitched toward his belt again. Instinct, perhaps, but a dangerous one. The two agents behind Mercer shifted forward instantly. No weapons drawn, just presence, enough to freeze that motion instantly. Natalie spoke again, this time with clipped patience. "Don't make this worse for yourself." It was then that Everett seemed to comprehend just how catastrophically he'd misjudged the entire situation. His expression changed. Not quite guilt, but the shock of someone who believed they were in control right up until the moment they weren't. Slowly, he unclipped his holster, removed the firearm, and extended it grip first toward Mercer. One of the agents intervened and took it from him. "Hands where we can see them," Mercer instructed. Everett complied. Jaw tight, shoulders pulled back, as if trying to pretend this was routine, as if he still maintained control. Natalie turned to Chris. "You good, sir?" Chris gave a short nod. "Better now." They stood there a moment longer. The world hadn't gone quiet. Someone's gas pump beeped its completion. A semi thundered past on the highway. A ringtone sounded inside the store. But the atmosphere was crystal clear. The only voice that mattered next emerged from the crowd. "Y'all seeing this?" someone asked loudly. "Better get his badge number," another shouted. A guy near Pump 5 yelled. "Yo, I captured everything, man. The whole thing. You want it? I'll send it." Mercer glanced over. "We'll want every recording." "Yes, our team will be in contact." "Y'all arresting him?" someone else asked. "No," Mercer said evenly. "Not yet. We're processing this right here." Two more black vehicles pulled in, this time unmarked sedans. Department of Homeland Security, likely notified when Chris's badge ID triggered their alert system during the confrontation. By this point, Everett looked like he was shrinking inside his uniform. It wasn't the weight of restraints or shackles. It was worse. The knowledge that everything was beyond his control, that the badge on his chest no longer shielded him. Mercer approached him again. "Deputy, you'll wait in that vehicle over there while we complete initial reports. You'll be monitored and recorded." Everett tried to speak. This isn't how things work around here." "No," Mercer said. "That's precisely the problem." Everett entered the unmarked sedan without another word. As the agents returned to their vehicles, Mercer's voice dropped to speak only to Chris. "We'll have the preliminary documentation finished by noon. Media's going to get hold of this quickly. You certain you're prepared for that?" Chris exhaled. Slow but steady. "I didn't ask for this kind of attention." "You didn't. But it found you." Across the lot, a young man looked directly into his phone camera, still recording. "Yo, this just went wild. Dude was just trying to get coffee. Secret Service detained a local cop. It's crazy out here." But the headlines weren't the conclusion. They were merely the beginning of a greater storm. One the department and the public weren't prepared to ignore. By the time the sun reached its zenith over Burlington, the video had already appeared on 4 major news sites. The first post came from someone named at Midwest Mike 612. A grainy but clear 30-second clip where Officer Everett could be seen aiming his weapon while Chris knelt calmly on the pavement. The caption: "He told him he was Secret Service." Dude laughed. Guess who's in trouble now? The post reached 50,000 shares within the hour. Inside the Field Command SUV parked near Pump 8, Chris sat with Natalie, James Mercer, and a DHS liaison named Rebecca Sanders. She typed rapidly, occasionally glancing at the footage being forwarded to them in waves. "We've confirmed 5 separate videos from civilian witnesses," she said. "Audio's clear on 3 of them. No editing. Direct uploads." Mercer looked over at Chris. "You want to make a statement today, or wait for official channels?" Chris shook his head. "No press. Not now. If they want the truth, they can wait for the report. You're going to face pressure. Public, internal, political. We're already receiving media inquiries. NBC, The Atlantic, even local radio stations requesting your name." Chris's expression remained unchanged. "Let them speculate for now." Across the lot, Everett sat in the back of the government sedan. Not handcuffed, but visibly rattled. His department liaison, a flushed man named Lieutenant Parker, had now arrived on scene, pacing in wide circles around the vehicle and muttering into his phone. Inside the gas station, the clerk, a wiry guy with a goatee named Trevor, stood with his arms crossed, watching through the windows. "I've seen him before," Trevor told one of the agents who entered to take his statement. "The cop, Everett. He always acts real jumpy. Had a shouting match in here once, because I wouldn't unlock the beer cooler early." "Did you witness today's incident from inside?" the agent asked. Trevor nodded. "At first, I thought it was a robbery or something. Then I saw the dude kneel and say he was Secret Service. That's when I grabbed my phone. But the female agent showed up before I could record anything useful." The agent made a note. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement if necessary?" Trevor sighed. "Yeah, I don't want that happening to me just because I wear a hoodie somebody doesn't like." Back in the SUV, Natalie looked over at Chris. "You sure you're all right?" He gave a slight nod. "I'm accustomed to watching these situations happen to others, not being caught in the middle of one. You handled it like a machine." "I had to. If I moved too quickly, I'd be the story. But not the kind that ends with a headline. The kind that ends with a funeral." Mercer remained silent momentarily, then adjusted his position and turned to Rebecca. "What's the department doing about Everett's status?" "Placed on administrative leave pending full investigation. No badge, no gun, no access to internal systems. Internal Affairs is launching a parallel inquiry," she replied. "Governor's office reached out yet?" "Not yet, but I give it an hour. Maybe less." Outside, the crowd had mostly dispersed. A few lingered, waiting to see if more drama would unfold, but most simply left with their own stories to tell. Stories they'd likely discuss over dinner or post on social media that evening. One woman, thin silver braids, leather sandals, leaned into her car window and said to her daughter, "You see that man? That's how you stand your ground without losing your soul." Chris, still seated inside the SUV, stared straight ahead. Not angry, not triumphant, just processing. "This isn't solely about me," he said finally. "This happens constantly. The only difference is I had a badge and backup. Most people don't." Natalie briefly rested her hand on the back of the seat in front of her. "And that's why it matters that the entire country witnessed it happen." But the conversation wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The aftermath was about to grow louder, and this time, nobody could pretend they hadn't seen it. By early afternoon, the footage had already become the top trending topic across multiple platforms. The hashtag Chris Spencer flooded feeds alongside captions like, "He stayed calm." They challenged him. They failed. And how many times has this happened when no cameras were rolling? Cable news networks broadcast the story repeatedly, their lower thirds reading Black Secret Service official wrongfully detained at gas station, and officer draws gun on federal agent, caught on video. And just like that, the small city of Burlington became the epicenter of a national conversation. Inside a secure DHS command post, Chris sat at a long steel table while legal advisors and communication officers debated strategy. "We can't keep your identity confidential anymore," said Jennifer Hayes, DHS Media Counsel. "Your photo's already public. Someone from your high school shared a yearbook picture, and the local newspaper confirmed your position. They're requesting an on-camera interview." Another network added CNN, PBS, even a morning show. Another added. Chris rubbed his forehead, leaning back in his chair. "I don't want to become the face of anything." "But you already are," Hayes said gently. "Even if you remain silent, the footage speaks volumes." He glanced toward the muted television in the corner. On screen, a clip showed him kneeling calmly on the asphalt while Everett's gun hovered inches from his head. The audio wasn't necessary. The image conveyed everything. The room quieted when a field agent entered with a folder. "Preliminary review of Officer Everett's personnel file," she announced. "Multiple complaints for aggressive conduct. 3 use-of-force incidents in the past 5 years. No suspensions. All complaints dismissed without formal discipline." Hayes shook her head. "They're going to devour that on national television." Chris stood and walked to the window. Outside, the street buzzed with news vans, protesters holding hand-painted signs, and onlookers hoping to catch a glimpse. He'd been involved in high-stakes operations before. International summits, presidential details, overseas threats. But none of it felt like this. Not this personal. Not this exposed. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. An older man with salt and pepper hair entered. Director Samuel Holloway, head of Regional Field Operations. "Mind if I speak with you privately?" Holloway asked. The others departed without comment. Once the room was empty, Holloway leaned against the table. "You managed it better than most would have," he said. "Hell, better than I would have." "I didn't see options," Chris replied. "He made a choice. I responded." Holloway nodded slowly. "I know men like Everett. They rarely face this kind of accountability. Not unless it concludes with bloodshed. This time it didn't. That's significant." Chris exhaled through his nose. "It shouldn't have to be significant just because I survived it." Holloway studied him for a long moment. "You want to distance yourself from this quietly. I'll support you. But I believe people need to hear from someone who maintained composure. Someone who didn't raise his voice, didn't take the provocation, didn't reach for anything except his credentials." Chris looked back at the television. This time the screen displayed side-by-side images, his federal ID and a still from the video. Commentary scrolled along the bottom. More faces talking than listening. Finally, he turned back to Holloway. "Then I want to approach it my way. One statement. One time. No manipulation. Understood?" As Holloway exited, Chris sat down again and opened a legal pad. He stared at the blank page momentarily, then picked up a pen. Outside, the commotion continued to grow. Cars honking in solidarity. Microphones thrust into agents' faces. Cardboard signs reading, "We saw you," and "Badge Injustice" flapping in the breeze. But as deafening as the outside world had become, the message Chris was about to write would silence every room it entered. Because it wouldn't be outrage. It would be truth. 3 days later, Chris stood behind a simple wooden podium in a community center in eastern Burlington. No flags. No fanfare. Just folding chairs, a modest sound system, and approximately 200 people who'd filled the room not to see a politician or celebrity, but a man they now felt they recognized. He didn't wear a suit this time. Just slacks and a black sweater, sleeves rolled up. His voice was steady, his eyes serious but not harsh. "I've dedicated over 15 years to protecting people who will never know my name," he began. "That's the profession. You blend in. You remain vigilant. You avoid drawing attention. But last week, attention discovered me regardless. The room remained hushed. Phones raised silently, capturing every word. I wasn't mistaken for someone dangerous. I wasn't confused for a threat. I was judged in seconds, not because of anything I did, but because of what someone thought they saw." He paused, not for dramatic effect, but to find the appropriate words. "I don't harbor hatred toward that officer. I don't even feel rage anymore. What I feel is disappointment. Profound disappointment that someone wearing a uniform, someone who swore to protect and serve, looked at me and saw something he decided didn't belong." In the front row, a group of high school students sat shoulder to shoulder. One of them leaned forward, elbows on knees, completely focused. Chris continued, "You've likely seen the video. Some of you recorded it. But that wasn't the crucial moment. The crucial moment was when I realized I had to decide who I wanted to be, even while someone else was deciding who I wasn't." He looked down briefly, then back up. "If I had shouted, if I had moved too rapidly, if I had uttered one wrong word, I might not be standing here. And that's the aspect that terrifies me." A wave of quiet agreement rippled through the crowd. Not theatrical, just sincere. My niece asked me recently, "Uncle Chris, why do people treat us differently if we didn't do anything wrong?" She's 12, and I couldn't offer her a simple answer because there isn't one. He took a breath. "But I told her this. When someone else lowers the standard, you elevate yours. When someone loses their composure, you hold your ground. You demonstrate to the world who you truly are, even when they attempt to rewrite your story before it begins." The audience applauded, not boisterously, just enough to convey they were listening with their hearts, not merely their ears. After the event, Chris remained and shook hands. An elderly man with thick glasses approached him slowly. "I served as a police officer in this town for 31 years, he said. "What happened to you shamed me. But hearing you speak, it reminded me who the badge is meant to protect." Chris nodded respectfully. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal." Later that night, at his sister's house, he sat at the kitchen table while his niece Amber colored in silence. "Did people believe you today?" she asked softly. "I think so." She didn't look up. "Do you think it will happen again?" Chris didn't answer immediately. "I think some people will always make incorrect assumptions. But I also think people are watching now. Learning. Listening." Amber finally glanced up. "You didn't yell." "No," he said. "But I spoke loudly enough." But even as the room emptied and cameras deactivated, what endured wasn't the video anymore. It was the voice of a man who refused to let someone else define him. The internal investigation lasted 2 weeks. Marcus Everett was suspended without pay pending a disciplinary hearing. His patrol record, previously overlooked, was now under intense scrutiny. Complaints once dismissed as misunderstandings began to reveal a pattern. The department issued a statement calling the incident deeply regrettable and promising to review community engagement protocols. It didn't say much. People noticed. Chris offered no further comment. He declined the talk show invitations. He didn't sign book deals or publish threads. He returned to work. 3 weeks after the marathon incident, he stood again before a group. But this time, it wasn't cameras or a crowd. It was a classroom of young recruits at a federal training facility in Lexington, Virginia. Future agents, faces still full of sharp angles and bright ideals. "Your responsibility," he told them, "isn't just protection. It's not just logistics or surveillance or strategy. Your responsibility is to see. He let the word hang. To see what's truly unfolding in a moment when everything's moving rapidly. To see what lies beneath the surface, even when your instincts urge you to react. Because one wrong decision can't be undone. A trainee raised his hand. Sir, how do you prepare for something like that? Maintaining composure, I mean. Chris smiled. The kind that doesn't extend too far. You don't train for composure. You train for clarity. And clarity doesn't arise from ego. It comes from listening, from patience, from knowing that if you're right, you don't need to shout about it. After the session, a few lingered. One young woman in her 20s approached him quietly. Asian American, perhaps 5'3". Voice soft but precise. My brother saw your video, she said. He doesn't trust law enforcement at all. But when he saw how you handled it, he said, maybe not all of them. I just wanted you to know. Chris nodded once. Thank you. He didn't require validation, but moments like that, they mattered. Later that evening, he sat on the small back porch of his hotel, sipping water, watching the horizon fade into deep blue. His phone buzzed with an alert. A national opinion piece had just published his full statement, calling it measured, powerful, and long overdue. He didn't read the article. Instead, he sent a quick message to Amber. Keep asking questions. That's how we create change. Love you. She replied seconds later with a picture of a drawing. Him standing tall in his suit next to a figure in a police uniform, both beneath words she'd written in thick crayon. Be better than what they expect. He smiled, not because it made everything acceptable, but because it reminded him that some stories don't conclude. They just continue teaching. This one taught several lessons. That respect without bias is a choice. That silence can be strength. That dignity doesn't always require volume. And perhaps most importantly, that performing your job well isn't sufficient. You also have to carry it with character, even when the world's aiming a weapon at you. Because how you carry yourself when no one believes you, that's when your true badge reveals itself. If this story moved you, share it with someone. And if you believe in truth over noise, subscribe for more stories that deserve to be told.